Hey, it's Andryanna. Thank you so much for clicking through and listening in on this episode of the Juggle is Real podcast. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to go with the flow here a little bit because, as it turns out, I just found out that I have a podcast cancellation and I'm supposed to be doing an interview right now. And as I was kind of going through and sorting through topic episodes for solo episodes in the future, I thought of a lot of questions that I receive and stories that people are interested in hearing. And so right now, instead of using this time slot to interview someone new whom we will hear from eventually, and it will be a beautiful episode, I'm certain, I thought that we could take this time and I could share very much off the cuff, unprepared, but honestly and straight from the heart, our experience with our child who has ADHD. So, in this conversation, I will kind of guide us through those initial symptoms, those initial signs that we saw. Now that we are looking back, now that we have some perspective, now that we can actually look at that bridge of incidents and be able to see our child and what he was going through at the time, now knowing his diagnosis and now knowing how he's really come full circle with the support that he's received. So we'll go through those initial stages. We'll go through his process and where we are today, with the hope that if you are going through this yourself, if you are suspecting, if you're just curious, maybe you know someone, or maybe you are an educator or a child supporter in some way, this is our perspective. And this is my opinion. I'm sure my husband has a different perspective as well on our ADHD journey with one of our children. Know that this is not professional expertise. Know that this is not coming from a medical doctor. This is our perspective, but I hope that it can help you, because I know that the advice that I had received and some of the friends and people closest to me who were really honest and sharing with me in an open and loving way are many of the reasons why our son now is excelling and thriving and doing so well. So I can already feel my throat getting all, emotional. So there might be some tears, but bear with me because I hope that this can help you. Let's dive right in. Hey, I'm Andryanna Gonco, and this is the Juggle is Real podcast. As I share my ongoing journey from experiencing burnout to leading a more mindful and intentional life with better balance, I hope you feel seen, that you realize your worth, lighten your load, and prioritize your own needs. As we hear from leading experts and well-known faces in the wellness, entrepreneurship, education, and motherhood space, I hope you gain insights, proven practices, and learn actionable tools to help you enjoy the juggle of work, family, and everything in between with a little less stress and a lot more ease, joy, and fun. Most of all, I hope you find what you need to simplify, streamline, and supercharge your own journey of better balance and self-love. Are you with me? Let's get started. Before we get into today's episode, let me share a recent review that just came in on Amazon for the Juggle is Real Authentic Self-Care Planner. Ashley writes, "So relatable, get this guide. From the beginning, I felt as though she was talking about me, and there's comfort in reading something so relatable. I'm already hooked and I'm just getting started." Thank you so much for sharing, Ashley. And if you haven't heard about the Juggle is Real Authentic Self-Care Planner yet, it's a 3-month guided journal that supports you in setting your intentions for the month by committing to yourself in small ways using 5 well-being pillars. And every day you recommit to yourself by choosing what will serve you best, by reaffirming your why, and by reminding yourself why you are worthy of the care that you invest in yourself. It's sprinkled with short stories and advice for juggling all the things. This self-care planner is an absolute lifeline for making the shift to a life with less stress, but more ease and better balance overall. Be sure to get your copy of The Juggle is Real Authentic Self-Care Planner now. It's available on Amazon, or head to the notes for this podcast episode to get the link. It makes a beautiful gift for all the busy women and new mamas in your life as well. Now let's get back to the episode. Okay, so taking a deep breath here. I have my tea, and this is emotional for me because it just brings me back to that place. And so if you're struggling, if you are in the weeds right now, I know now, because I have that perspective, I can pull myself out of the situation knowing that it does all work out, knowing that our son is thriving and doing really well. But if I think back a few years ago, before we had this diagnosis and before we've worked through all of these things, which are an ongoing journey, and, things are changing at all times. But if I think back to when I felt really, really hopeless and really defeated at times, it's hindsight being 2020. But if you are in that place now, my heart goes out to you, and I send you so, so, so much love, because I know what it's like to take that person who means so much to you, whom you love so much, and you just want to see feeling good, doing well, and really being the best person that they can be. So let's begin. Oh my goodness, let's see. So our oldest child is the child who has ADHD. So now that I have 3 children, now that I've seen 3 personalities kind of go through those toddler stages into, starting school, preschool, interacting with other children, all of that stuff. Now I can see how they are different from our oldest. And all children are unique. All children respond and react differently in different scenarios. Your birthplace, whether you're an oldest, an only child, a middle child, the baby, the gaps between the ages of your children, all of this plays a factor. But for me, our oldest, he was our first, right? And so I didn't have a lot to go by in terms of, well, this feels normal. This feels strange. This was our first go, right? This is our first kick at the can. And so some of the things that I remember, I'm not sure if it's because it was just my first time going through these situations, or if there were, issues that we maybe should have seen as signs that we didn't, because it was simply our first time. So I can remember, and the first sort of memory, I mean, our son also had some other things that he was going through. So he, we are so grateful that he is, very, very healthy relative to, that diagnosis. And he, was growing. He was happy. He was a curious, infant, toddler. But he was a very, very busy person. And so he was a go, go, go. And, they say, busy boys, this is normal. This is regular. Like, this is how boys are. He was very much what you would call busy, very physical, very hands-on, and he very much needed his routine. In fact, he was very, very resistant to change and to transitions. And so this, now looking back, the transition piece, now that we've done so much research, now that we've worked with professionals, this kind of was a flag that you can see that this trouble with making a transition, and it could be very easily from, going from watching a show to eating a meal, going from playtime to, having to leave a play date or having to leave his grandparents' house. It was always a very big struggle. And, there were tantrums, there was a lot of emotion. And, we did the best that we could, right? We would give the heads up, 15 more minutes, 10 more minutes, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 more minute. And we had, the timers, we had the clocks, we had visual representations, but transitions were always very difficult for our son. Now, this going hand in hand with the routine aspect, which now I know children who have ADHD really do thrive in a setting that has a predictable routine. All children can thrive with routine. All of my children do really well with routine, but especially our oldest. So he also needed ear tubes. He had a little bit of a hearing issue because there was fluid in his ears. So he also had a speech delay. And so he had trouble communicating how he felt, communicating his thoughts and his feelings because of this. So this also goes hand in hand. And we didn't learn until he was in kindergarten that he also needed glasses because he didn't present any of the traditional telltale signs of not being able to see well. So there's a lot going on here, but I can remember going on a trip. It was 2017. And so we had our middle child was 6 months old, and we went to Florida. Our friends invited us to have a visit with them in their parents' condo. It was so gracious. So we were so grateful to go. And our oldest had just turned 2. And that trip, I can remember so much of our energy going into trying to make sure that he was comfortable in so many ways, right? Like, taking this little person out of the routine that he desperately needed, not knowing that he had ADHD. It was very challenging. And I can remember my friend taking me aside, and he still napped. And so both of our children were napping, and she just was really honest and just said, I have seen this before in someone else that she knew who had a child. And I think that it's probably best that you talk to your doctor about this. Some of these things that are happening, I don't think it's just being a busy 2-year-old. So that was sort of our first indicator that maybe there were differences that were making his challenges harder for him, that it wasn't just, the terrible twos or being a busy toddler or, just, having a bad day or being hangry or needing a nap or being tired, that there was something else that was contributing to the degree to which he was busy, the degree to which he was hands-on, the degree to which he struggled so much with simple transitions. And so if we can fast forward a little bit, he got his ear tubes. We started speech language therapy. He was learning to communicate better and much more effectively. We're in kindergarten now, and we find out that he does indeed need glasses. So he has his glasses, which for a 4-year-old, he actually started school when he was 3.5 because he has a later birthday. So that's another contributing factor to everything. So a 3.5-year-old, he might have been 4 at the time. He gets glasses. It's very difficult for him. He must have lost his glasses I think we might have gone through 4 complete pairs of glasses in an 8-month period, like within that school year. He had either lost them or had broken them through frustrations, would just break them, like completely, like rip an arm off. They were scratched. It was very difficult for him. It was also difficult for him to participate in the kindergarten activities where he would have to sit and focus. So story time was very challenging for him. He would run into the hallway. He needed extra support with additional educational workers. He would have outbursts, and he really just wasn't getting the most out of that experience. And so we worked with his kindergarten teacher, who was such a beautiful person. And so I'm so grateful for the people who have touched his life, because I know that he was placed in that classroom for a reason. We worked with her. We worked with our doctor, who referred us to a pediatrician. And there's a lot of steps involved. I don't, in our experience, there wasn't a quick diagnosis, because there are so many factors that go into making a diagnosis like ADHD. So we had to do, fill out different paperwork. We had to get the perspective of the teacher, the perspective of ourselves as parents, my husband and I. And we went through this process, and it was like this monitoring process. But as you know, after his kindergarten experience, and so we're moving into when we get into 2020, and that was really challenging when the lockdowns hit. So March of 2020 was grade 1 for our son, and he was already struggling in school because of the challenges of not being able to sit at a desk. That was so difficult, to sit at a desk or a round table or in a chair. And there were outbursts and very emotional reactions when there were those transitions, when it's time to go from recess to back to in the classroom, when it's time to go from one subject to another subject, when it's time to, get out a piece of paper or go get your lunch pail or do any of these very simple tasks that are very easy for children who do not have neurodivergence. These are very challenging things. So just following a schedule and participating in those very small tasks were huge, huge challenges. And so if you're in this place now where your child is school aged and you're hearing things like, oh, well, he's difficult, or he's, defiant. Defiant is a word that I think is used a lot. A lot of this comes from the sheer frustration that our child was feeling, because he couldn't verbalize how his brain was working, how there was so much happening that he had a very difficult time stopping to focus, to change tasks, to get out that pencil, to follow the teacher, to do any of the things that a quote unquote normal child could do with such ease. So this was another factor for us. We go into lockdowns. I'm now homeschooling a child who's supposed to sit at a desk, at a table, in front of a computer for 6 hours a day, where they might do 15 minutes of a YouTube video dance. And that was torture for everyone involved. It was torture, first and foremost, for our son, who could barely be in a classroom setting, never mind sit and watch a teacher on a screen who had not done this before, was not used to teaching on Zoom, with students who were constantly disrupting, students who were not muted, or students who were walking around and trying to learn on a small screen. These pivotal years of lockdown were, I know, so challenging on so many families. Without our ADHD diagnosis, this meant that our son just couldn't do it. He could not sit. And for the times that he was sitting, I don't know that he was actually gaining any learning from sitting and being tortured to stay in his seat and watch his teacher on a screen. And I know that this has had effects on so many children. And this is just our experience. But my youngest, who was then in junior kindergarten, was able to do this with so much more ease than our oldest. And so when I think back to those times, of course, I was working from home. My husband was still working out of the home, having our children virtually schooled. And then also, I had my third pregnancy. So this was an interesting time for sure. But going back to the ADHD signs, I mean, having that much difficulty was certainly a sign. And so we were already going through this process of seeing what could be causing these signs to really appear in challenging ways. And so it was about halfway through that time when the pediatrician did make that diagnosis, and we did start our ADHD official journey. And I'll say that before this experience, when I look back, I really had a lot of difficulty just coming to terms with it. I didn't want my son to be labeled. I didn't want him to be seen differently. And I also had a lot of resistance to medication to support him with his ADHD. Traditionally, and I still am this way, my preference in all walks of life for all ailments is to try to look to natural ways to alleviate ailments or issues or problems. And so even if it's a headache, I'm not opposed to taking ibuprofen, but I will go through many ways to try to alleviate my headache before I turn to taking a pill. And this is, just my personal perspective, but I know that all medications, there are positives and there are negatives. And I was just really, really concerned that putting our son on medication was just trying to mask the symptoms and hide the problem. I wanted to completely fix it. I wanted to take away the ADHD. And now that I've learned more, now that I know more, I understand that this is just the way his brain works. There's not a magical herb that's going to take away how his brain works. And in some cases, children do grow out of the ADHD symptoms and can thrive without medication. And there are probably children who can do this as well. In our case, until we tried medication to support him with his ADHD, we really had no idea how difficult it was for him to simply just go through a day. We really did not know. And so here goes another story. And at this point, so he's doing speech language therapy. He was doing additional tutoring for school. I had purchased any sort of natural type of supplement. He was taking, additional omega fatty acids. But all of these things are good things. All of these things are things that we continue to do. We, removed things from his diet. I still do not allow for him to have additional food coloring. Red food dye is a no-no in our house for all of our children. We try to take out as much processing as possible within reason, right? We want him to have as good of an experience. So we're not, completely taking everything out of his life that he deems enjoyable from the perspective of a young child. So we're doing all of these things. And then we have this ADHD diagnosis and the doctor prescribes a medication. And so I am just I was distraught. I was in one way, I was, relieved that there was a diagnosis because it provided us with some answers. And then it allowed us to then be able to fully explore that path and that avenue of, okay, so if ADHD is the diagnosis, then I just consumed myself with trying to learn more about what that is, more about the different types of ADHD, how it can really show up in the lives of a child, and how we can support our child who has this diagnosis. And so there's a lot that the doctor can provide. I will say that Dr. Gabor Mate, his book, Scattered Minds, was a huge support. It made me feel really guilty and really bad in some ways that I was failing as a mother, but it really helps the reader, and it helped me understand how he might be feeling and why he might be feeling the ways that he is. And so gaining not only a medical perspective, not only a holistic perspective, this just very, very full, not, not a narrow focus, but trying to understand it from all sorts of different walks, from people who have ADHD, from people who have studied ADHD, from people who are now, supporting through different types of therapies and support, allowed me to, in this case, make the decision that we would do a trial run with a medication. And what really was the tipping point for us was speaking to one of Ryan's cousins Ryan's my husband, one of his cousins whose children has an ADHD diagnosis and who was not medicated until the age of 13. And it was the story that they told us when we had spoken to them to see, if there were different things that we should try or things that they should do. And they told us that when he started his medication at the age of 13, after struggling through all of elementary school, I think he was in grade 8 or grade 9 at the time when he first tried a medication, a drug for ADHD. And he said to his parents, I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. And I love you. And it's fine. And I don't want you to be sad, but I wish I would have known about this sooner. And I wish I could have tried something like this sooner. Because now knowing that this way, how I feel when I take this medication, that this is how people feel normally, I wish I could have done it sooner. And so this is where I get emotional, because I just think, and that was sort of, for me, I was like, okay, I don't, and I know that no matter what the decision of any parent or any guardian is, it is done in love. It is done from a place of wanting the best for your children. And I know that there are stories of kids who have taken medication and it didn't work out. But I just thought, I don't want our son to struggle more than he has to. And if there's a way that he can struggle less, if there's a way that he can better understand how his brain works, that allows him to function in a way that will support him, I don't want him to come to us years down the road saying, I wish I would have known. I wish I could have done this sooner. And so that was the reason why we chose to do a trial with a drug. His first drug that he was prescribed was Vyvanse. This is very common. There are two different streams of medication, of drugs for ADHD. And I'm not going to get into all the technicalities because I'm certainly going to screw something up because I'm not a medical professional. But this Vyvanse was one type of a drug. And it did help him, I will say. It did help him enough that he was able to better be supported in the classroom. He still had a behavior management plan because his undiagnosed ADHD, then because of that pent up frustration, really manifested into what medical professionals call, what do they call it? Something defiance disorder, which really isn't, it's not an actual medical diagnosis, but that behavior stems from an undiagnosed ADHD. So many times, most times, as a person who has this, now I'm screwing it up, something defiance disorder, starts with an O. Anyway, you might know what I'm talking about. And if not, don't worry about it. They'll often have both ADHD as well as ODD. But getting back to my point, he was doing well in some ways in that he could pay more attention. He was getting more and enjoying his time in the classroom more. He still needed extra support in the classroom. And he's also needed an individual education plan. That's what we call it in Canada, an IEP. I know there's different terms in the States for these things. He did need extra support in the classroom. What wasn't great with this line, and everyone is different, and this is why it's a trial, right? This is why we look at things and we see what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and make an informed decision. He was having a hard time falling asleep. And sleep, of course, is so important for any child. Our brains are developing. He was having a hard time falling asleep. He also wasn't eating. So this is very common for any type of ADHD drug, but to the point where he wasn't eating enough, right? He would have some breakfast. He wouldn't eat all day at school. That's not good, right? That's not good. It was suppressing his appetite too much. Wasn't really eating dinner. He would have something before bed as this medication wore off, and then he couldn't fall asleep. So it was a little while on that drug. And then we went to see the pediatrician and we explained, there's some good things about it. Here are some of the bad things. And so she made the decision that we would try something new. And this was another turning point in this journey, which has led us to where we are today. Because I'm going to say he was probably on Vyvanse for about 6 to 8 months, was doing better, wasn't thriving. So then we changed to the different school of medication. This one's called Vyfentin. And again, this is not medical advice at all, just letting you know our experience. And so this had immediate positive shifts in that our son could function in a way that allowed him to boost his self-confidence, which was really, really low. When you can't do what you see everyone around you doing, when it's very challenging to do even the most simple tasks, you soon realize, and at a young age, you're pretty oblivious to it. But then, my son's in grade 2 and then he's in grade 3 and he's seeing his peers, they're reading and he's seeing them, doing things that came so easily to them, or what appeared to be very easy to them, that he was still very much struggling with. And that's when your peers see the shifts around them as well, right? And this is how children can then get labeled as different things, right? So when your friends can't sit down, when your friend is constantly getting in trouble, or when someone in your classroom is going through these challenges, kids don't see that as, oh, I feel bad. He must be going through something tough. Like he probably needs more support. He needs additional help to make him thrive. They see that as, oh, he's bad or she's bad, or that's, like we shouldn't, don't be like that person. And so this is where the labels can come in. And so when we made the change to this new medication, not only was he sleeping great, not only was he eating all of his meals and have an appetite, and it wasn't such a struggle to get our child to eat, who was never a picky eater, who always loved food. Now we were seeing this spark reignite in his curiosity, in his creativity, in his, willingness to try new things and step into this version of himself who had the confidence, who had the self-worth to try things. And so that has been the single most gratifying, but also just amazing part of this journey has been to see how all of these supports have really helped him. And so alongside his medication, we were also taking him to see a social worker for therapy, to do one-on-one discussions to support him in a way that helped him better communicate his feelings, better identify his feelings, pinpoint his frustrations, allow him to be able to speak about them, and also further develop that self-worth and that confidence that he can do the things that, even though they're challenging, he can do them. And so I will say for anyone going through this type of a journey, we as parents, we want to be there. We want to do the things. And sometimes that works and sometimes that's enough. Oftentimes having an outlet, being able to speak to someone, having that time to connect with a professional on a level of really honing in on pain points, frustrations, things that children don't understand, can't really put a finger on, can't speak to in a normal setting, having a professional work with them on things like that can really be helpful. So I personally would recommend that whatever approach you're doing, try multiple prongs, right? So if it is, strict diet and, restricting different things, if it is choosing, herbal formulations and different supplements, if it is through supports at school, if that is an option, really advocating for multiple approaches to support your child in various ways, still speaking to allowing them to do the things that they enjoy, right? Because if your child has ADHD, you know that it's not that they can't focus. They can focus on the things that they truly love, right? They can actually have what's called hyper focus, where if it's something that they are really interested in, they can't see anything around them. Time stands still. They're not eating. They're not doing anything. They just put themselves in this bubble and they can really hyper focus, which can be a superpower in some ways, especially, moving into adulthood and moving into pursuing a career in your passion. The hyper focus is great. The ADHD symptoms and signs can be supported in multiple ways. The other thing that I will say, and we're going to wrap up here, is that this sort of leads us into this self-confidence piece, the self-worth piece, the ability to really just have this click and really just see that they have these abilities that they can tap into is so beautiful. For our son, now looking that it's been a little while now where he's been taking this drug and he's no longer seeing a therapist, but having that foundation of communication tools and structure, coupled with now his other passions that he pursues through sports and through hockey, and different creative pursuits, and stepping up and putting his hand up at school and no longer needing a behavior management plan, being able to turn things in at school, come home to show us that he's received, a good grade on something that he has worked on at school, all of these things that, looking back a few years when I was in the weeds, when we were struggling, now to where we are, not saying that there aren't challenges, not saying that now this is this perfect child, because that doesn't exist, but seeing all of these glimmers of the happiness, the validation that he gets, the confidence that he feels being able to do these things that he has always wanted to do, that he's always wanted to be, now through these supports, now with this diagnosis, now because of the medical support, the therapies, his tutors, his speech language pathologist, his social worker, his beautiful teachers, his additional support staff at the school, all of these things, coaches, I could go on, but family, like supportive family, my parents, my husband's parents, his aunts and uncles, all of this framework now has come together, and we see this thriving child who still struggles at times, still gets frustrated, who still is now, trying to, become even more independent in ways. And these are the things that we see, that we just now look back on and say, you know what? It was all worth it. All of the times and the hours and the pain and the tears. We now know that this child is just amazing, and he always was. But for anyone who's listening that is thinking like, this is too much and I don't know what to do and I don't know what direction to take, I just want you to know that one day you will have this perspective, and you are, because you're listening, because you're caring, because this is coming from this place of love. And I know that you might be scared, and I know you're probably worried, and it might keep you up at night, and you might have anxiety, and you might, worry about your child. And I think we always do to some degree. Know that he or she or they will find their path and their way, thanks to the support that you are providing. And if I can conclude with anything, it really is love that helps you and that helps your child. And with the perspective that it's going to work out, we're going to find a way. Our child is this incredible being, is going to find the direction that they need. This perspective will hook you up with the right tools, the right resources, the right, page on Google that pops up for you, and the right support system, and the right doctor, and the right therapist, and all of these things. There's so much available to you at no cost. Sometimes there's waiting. Sometimes there's, frustrations with our medical system, but advocate. You know that something needs to change. And if you have this feeling, don't put it off. Our process took us a while because these things can't necessarily change overnight, but it is so worth the journey to say that our child is now really and truly being the person that they were meant to be. So this is where we are now. He's still very much a child. Things can change and things will shift, but I wanted to just share this. I'm glad that I had this pocket of time to put this episode together, to share this with you, to hopefully help you and support you in your journey. If you have questions, there is an email address in the notes for this podcast episode. And one final note is that you should care for yourself as you care for your child. I mean, I say it all the time, and no matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances, you should always be caring for yourself. But these things can take a toll. And I know that in those moments of desperation and hopelessness, if there is an outlet that you can find that supports you, it will only better support you in being that advocate for your child. So please make sure that you are caring for yourself as well as your children in their own journeys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, can you write me a review in Apple Podcasts? Can you rate this episode? Please share this with a friend if you know someone who's going through a challenging time, whether it be an ADHD journey or something else that is challenging for them and their children in their lives. It might spark something in them to help them or to steer them in a direction that maybe they hadn't thought of. So please share this with a friend or someone that you know. And I hope to see you here. We have lots of great episodes. We do have some great interviews coming up, and I can't wait to share it all with you on the next episode of The Juggle is Real. Take good care.